Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Our special guest today is Bethany Babcock, an absolute titan in our industry. Bethany has worked in property management, leasing, and investment sales for over 20 years. She founded Foresite Real Estate back in 2014. In 2018, she was named by the San Antonio Business Journal as one of the 40 under 40. And a late happy birthday to you, Bethany, who actually just turned 40. It's incredible how much she's accomplished in such a short period of time. Bethany is one of the very few brokers in San Antonio to receive national awards in the categories of both top leasing agent and top investment sales agent. She has been published online with Forbes and featured in the Business Journal, as well as been a guest speaker for the South Texas CCIM Symposium. Bethany also enjoys guest lecturing for the Real Estate Finance Department at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Back in 2020, Bethany opened up Foresite's own training program to those outside of the company and created the CRE Launch Program, which has worked with students from more than 10 universities and 12 different brokerage firms to develop and retain new talent in the industry. More on that in just a second. The unique culture that Bethany has created at Foresite has lured industry veterans as well as developed exceptional talent internally. And in 2022, Foresite was named a #1 best place to work for small businesses by the San Antonio Business Journal. Bethany is a very special person, and she is changing the future of commercial real estate on a daily basis with the CRE Launch Program. If you are listening and familiar with our mutual friend, Beth Azor, who has been both a supporter of Women Speak CRE and also a supporter of Bethany, Foresite, and the CRE Launch Program, I wanted to throw out a challenge directly from Beth. So Beth has challenged her colleagues, her friends in commercial real estate to sponsor scholarships for women in our industry who are interested in attending the CRE Launch Program. Scholarships can range anywhere from $5,000 to $500. And so the gauntlet has been laid down. I know Beth has been such a leader in this, in helping to get scholarships rolling for the CRE Launch Program. It will commence in just a few weeks. The kickoff I will be speaking at as the opening speaker on the talent and hiring markets in CRE on May 29th, which I believe is a Thursday. There is still time to sponsor students, ideally women. If you're listening to this podcast, let's sponsor women in our industry. But please, if you have the extra funds, if you have the ability, whether you would like to be a sponsor of scholarships, whether you'd like to be a volunteer, a mentor, there are so many different ways to get involved. You'll hear more about this from Bethany here in the next few minutes. But thank you so much for joining us for this special episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Hello and welcome to The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. We are so happy to have you here, Bethany Babcock. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's dive into all the great questions that we have prepared for you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. A little bit about me. I'm kind of an industry outsider turned insider. So I did not grow up in this industry like a lot of people do, and fell into it by accident and really just fell in love with it. And then my goal is to help other people do the same and get more and more people into the industry. But I started and run a brokerage firm in San Antonio and Austin that focuses on retail and office product. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. And I know, like me, you had kind of an unconventional childhood. So tell us a little bit about coming here and getting your start, and maybe a little bit more about your pathway into CRE.
Yeah. So I'm what a lot of people would call a air quotes MK, which stands for missionary kid. So my parents were pastors and missionaries that started a Bible school and a church up in northern Chile. And that is where I grew up. And I spent most of my childhood there. So I was born in the United States, but I lived over there. So I wasn't really American, but I wasn't really Chilean. And I spent most of my time overseas. And then when I was 18, it was kind of expected that I would move back to the United States and go to college while my parents remained on the field. And so that is what I did. And so I hopped on a plane and narrowed down a few different choices of what part of the United States I wanted to move to. Decided on San Antonio because there was a church I really liked here, and plugged in. And then I never left.
That's amazing thinking too about back then where you didn't have Google in the same way. You didn't have all these different resources that we have now to even research and make such an informed choice. And for you to be like one of one, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate, but that was also
Yeah.
pretty intentional. My mom was that was my senior project, we called it.
Mm.
So she
Oh,
wanted me
fun.
to do some research as to where I would live. I had to prepare a budget. I had to research and call jobs and find out what they paid. I had to figure out how much apartment was, what community college would cost me, and I had to figure it out because I didn't have the financial support of them, and I didn't have a fallback plan. It's not like I could hop back on a plane and go back over there. So I had to figure it out. So yeah, that was kind of intentional, but it worked out.
I love that. And I would love for you to tell us, because I know you've shared it on X before, and I think the story is just so fascinating about how on your first day as a temp, you got to your first job on accident. Can you walk us through that story?
Yeah, it's a really fun story because it can be viewed as either accidental or divine intervention, depending on how
Mhm.
you look at it. I view it as divine intervention because I got the wrong job sheet. I went to a staffing agency and I was like, hey, give me whatever job you can give me that'll pay me as quickly as possible because I need a job. And I told him, I was like, I don't have any experience, but I'm bilingual. I can type, send me somewhere. So they were going to send me to an insurance company to just be like a admin, general admin temporarily
Mhm.
while someone was on maternity leave. And I was like, great. So they gave me the sheet of paper and off I went with the address and everything. And they gave me the wrong sheet of paper. And they sent me instead to a family office that owned a bunch of commercial real estate in San Antonio, who was looking for more of an administrative role, front office kind of a thing. And so I showed up at the interview. The interviewer was confused. I was confused. We were trying to figure out what happened. By the time we figured it out, he's like, you know what? This is an entry level job too. We'll just go ahead and
Mm.
interview you. And so I did, and I got the job. And I actually worked there for years while during the day and then working and going to school at night.
Awesome. I love that story. And I love that something so small, like I think about how these various different changes and right turns and left turns can just absolutely change everything. And that's why I love that story. So tell me a little bit about, you know, afterwards, you spent some time in property management and then decided to take another turn into brokerage. Tell me about how that all happened and what your initial concerns and fears were about getting into the brokerage business.
There were plenty, yes. So I worked during the day and I went to school at night. And by the time I was graduating, I had worked there for a little over 5 years and was already a property manager. So at a pretty young age, I was managing these buildings. I felt like I was the coolest thing ever. I was getting paid decent money and I had a lot of responsibility and I could point to these really cool properties and shopping centers and office buildings that I was managing. And I couldn't really make that shift into brokerage very easily because,
Mhm.
I had thought about it. I was curious about it, but I couldn't really do it because I wanted to be able to I couldn't afford it. By the time I graduated college, I was ready for another adventure, but not in the sense of just going straight commission only. I couldn't afford to do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But as luck would have it, not sure we could call it luck, the Great Recession hit and there were no jobs available. I lost my job. I needed a job. And at that point, nobody in the industry was hiring. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? And every door was closing. And really, the only one that stayed open was commission only brokerage selling shopping centers, which nobody wanted to buy during the financial crisis. And while people
Yes.
might wanted to buy them, and you might find a buyer, you might find a seller, but certainly no one was financing them. Right. So things were just
Mhm.
sitting on the market. It was really, really challenging. So I say we because my husband, I was newly married at the time
Mhm.
took really the only job that would take me, which was that. And it was a humble beginning, and it was really hard, and we had to figure it out. We had to side hustles and go down to one car for a little while and move into a tiny apartment. But after a few years, finally was worth it, and so was able to make that transition into brokerage.
Awesome. And I know that mentorship is a big part of your story. And it's also a thread that kind of runs through into the present day and some of the work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about your mentor and what that meant at the early stages of your brokerage career.
Yeah, you're right. It is a really important part of the puzzle. So when I started into brokerage, I came at it with a lot of skepticism and concern
Mhm,
because the brokerage community I felt like wasn't the highest integrity. I felt like
mhm,
they didn't do things right. And I was very skeptical.
mhm,
But it's kind of pushed into it. And so I looked around for a mentor. The company that I worked for wanted me to have a mentor,
mhm,
and there was nobody that I could just align with in terms of the way I wanted to do business. And off on the corner, there was a guy that worked in a completely different product type. I was focusing on office,
mhm,
he was focusing on retail, and he was just a high integrity guy. He talked about his family all the time. His clients, you could tell, really respected him. It was very
mhm,
even disposition, and I thought,
mhm,
I like that guy. That guy I could be like. And
mhm,
so, we'd started talking and working on projects together. And then I switched from office to retail so he could mentor me. And that turned out to be a wonderful relationship and dynamic. We worked together for the year long relationship that they typically set up for you
mhm.
as a mentor mentee. And after that expired, we decided to keep working together. And so we formed a team and we worked in that capacity for a long time. And it was eventually his idea that I leave to go start Foresite.
And what was the driver when he had that conversation with you? Tell us a little bit about what was in your head, what you were thinking, the fears, all of those things.
I thought he was crazy. I'll be completely honest, because really what it came down to was the fact that I was afraid of walking away from what I felt like I had accomplished in investment sales. I felt like I was at the top of the food pyramid in
Mhm,
essence for the typical brokerage. And I had probably the ego that matched it. And it was a little hard for me to step back and say, okay, let me start all over again. But he really encouraged me to take a look at it and look at it differently. And I thought about it. I had a new baby at the time. I had my mom who was sick at the time. So I had a new baby at the time. My
mhm.
mom was sick and moved in with us so that I could help take care of her. Like, you could not have picked a worse time. And he's like, you should leave and start a business and do management and leasing. And I was like, I don't know if you looked around. My world is falling apart. This is not the time to
Yes.
start a business. And he said something that completely changed the way I looked at it. And he was like, this is the perfect time because no one's paying
Mhm,
attention. They all
mhm,
think you're on maternity leave. No one's watching. And I thought, wow, all the pressure just came off. And I was
mhm,
like, yeah, no one's watching. This might be the perfect time to give it a shot. And so we did. And so in 2014, I left. And the idea was that for a while, I would focus on the management and leasing side of the business.
mhm,
And we would refer business back and forth. He would stay there and he would do sales, and we would work together that way. And that was
mhm.
the original plan. But it didn't work out that way. In fact, the management and leasing side became very big and grew to the point where I was like, it makes so much more sense for us just to bring it all under one roof and work
Mhm.
together. And we're business partners. Let's do this together. And so now we run it together. And he moved over and his whole team followed. And so my mentor became my business partner.
I love it. And I want to point out just a few things that you said that I think will really resonate with younger people in the business. And the first is that rather than just go to the person who seems like they would be a natural fit because of the asset class or specialization that you are working on, you looked for somebody who had a values match with you. You looked
Yes.
for someone who you wanted to emulate and wanted to be like in the business. And that's why I think, too, it's so important for us to show up with our values front and center because it allows us to connect and find like minded people and opportunities, whether those are business partners or clients or what have you. But this idea that the values are the thing that are not flexible. So operating on that values front first. And then the second thing, this idea that I think sometimes, and I felt this way too when I started my company, that we feel like we have to make this huge announcement, right? That we have to do everything in public. And I love this idea instead of going underground and doing the work and building the systems and processes and everything that you'll need. And I think it also speaks to sometime as women how we are underestimated, right? That
Mhm.
people don't necessarily have these expectations of us that are as high as the expectations we have for ourselves. And I know that that's something you and I have talked about. Tell me about how that's worked in your favor throughout your career.
Lots of times. Yes. I love all of those stories because it's funny because there's been several times where I get confused with being the admin or something like that. And I don't take offense to it. I actually really
Yeah.
enjoy that. And in some ways, right? So I remember there was a time when I was working in brokerage at the big firm and with my then mentor that I would cold call. And I realized pretty quickly that they didn't want to talk to me. I had no industry experience. I was new. But if I introduced myself as being a member of my senior partner's team,
Hmm.
they would think that I was his assistant or his secretary setting a meeting for him. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to roll with that. And
Yeah,
so
I'm not going to correct you.
I'm not going to correct you because I knew he was going to come on the meeting anyways. So
Hmm.
it was perfect. So I was able to set a lot of really cool meetings with some big decision makers and big property owners really early on in my career, just borrowing his reputation and minimizing mine, which was okay. And I think a lot of people feel like that's not okay. Like they need to make sure it's known that what their place is in the industry and that they are equal. Well, I recognized I wasn't equal. I
Hmm.
did not have the
Yeah.
knowledge or industry experience, and that was okay for that season. And so I just leaned into that and leaned heavily on his reputation and name and the fact that people were underestimating me or assuming I was an administrative assistant and just rolled with it. And I was able to get a lot better meetings than most people because of it. So no regrets.
I love it too because you were, kind of in rooms that you wouldn't have been let into otherwise. And I
Yes.
think, commercial real estate, just like you learning Spanish in Chile, you are learning through immersion. You're put into these environments and you're hearing these conversations. And I remember early in my career being in meetings and just writing down words and phrases that I didn't know so I could ask questions about them later. And I think, what a smart thing to do if you can get your ego out of the way. And I
Yes.
think that that's such a gem for anyone out there who is cold calling and hitting their head against a brick wall. If you have that senior partner, leverage their name, leverage their brand. It shouldn't be all about you anyway. It should be
Mhm.
about the client. But that's such a great tip. I love that. Tell me a little bit about the launch program, the CRE launch program, and kind of how that came to be.
Yeah. So that is my passion project. It's really really important to me. It came to be in a couple of different ways, but the main one was really we had created an internal learning management system for our own team of training and developing our own staff and agents. And that was built through just writing down everything from how to draft an LOI, how to do this, how to prepare for the first meeting, the basics of all the different product types, terminology, all this kind of stuff, and just putting that all into a place that was a central knowledge repository for the company that really ended up helping us a lot with reducing our own turnover to be able to attract
Mhm.
talent, reducing the burden of training from the senior agents on our team, and increasing mentorship
Mhm.
opportunities because it wasn't so much of a responsibility on the senior mentors. And so that worked out really well for us.
Mhm.
And Q 2020, when everyone was losing internships, I noticed online on LinkedIn that a
Mhm.
lot of students were losing their internships and didn't have the credits necessary to graduate. And so,
Yeah.
in that regard, it was really challenging because I thought, my gosh, can you imagine what it's like to get that far along in your college career and
Yeah.
need just 3 more hours to graduate and the whole world shut down? And I was like, this is
Yeah.
cruel. And so,
Yes.
very impulsively, I thought we might be able to help them with that. So I wrote on LinkedIn and I didn't know who would see it or if anyone would see
Mhm.
it. I said, hey, if you lost your internship and you need those hours to graduate, if you have any interest in commercial real estate at all, just even a little bit, I'm going to open up our learning management system. We're going to host a virtual internship for you guys and we'll sign up on your hours. And I thought maybe we'd get 5 or 6 students. And we ended up instead with 2 back-to-back classes of 20 students. And these were
Amazing.
people who a lot of them had never known what commercial real estate even was, kind of like how when I started. And
Yeah.
what was so rewarding was that the next year we noticed a ton of them were working in the industry. And it was this
Amazing.
light bulb that went off like, this
Yeah.
can fix a lot of problems. So the
Yeah.
next year we were like, let's run it simultaneously with our own internal program. It'll get our own team to be a little more competitive because they've got other people in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it won't be any more like the corporate learning management system. Now it's an actual training program that they have to compete with others. And then the next year, other brokerage firms were like, can we put people through it? And it has kind of evolved and grown that way to the point where now we've completely debranded it from our firm. We call it the
Mhm.
CRE Launch Program. It has nothing associated with Foresite, except it's the same team that helps run it. And it's grown. We have 5 campuses now, as well as virtual. And every year it grows a little bit more. And it's been really extremely rewarding. But it's a 10-week program, super intensive. Only about 70% of those that go through it graduate. So this is
Wow.
not just a completion sticker. We actually put a lot of time and effort into grading and giving feedback on it. but it's a whole lot of fun and it's extremely rewarding to come across people
Mhm.
that are like, I was in the class of 2022 and now I'm a property manager, or now I'm at a firm, or now I'm an investor. And it's just extremely rewarding.
And I know because we've talked about it, and this is something that I'm also passionate about, is this idea of attracting the next generation
Yes.
and giving them the clue if they don't have a family connection or family backgrounds like you and I both didn't have, creating this awareness of what commercial real estate is and helping them to get a foot in the door, I think is so important. But I also know that it's not sales training, it's subject matter expertise. So tell us a little bit about kind of the structure, who this is for, some of the folks that have come through, the types of roles that they're in, because it's so diverse. And that was something that really impressed me.
Yeah, it is designed to be basically what you thought you would learn when you got your real estate license, right? And you get your real estate license and you're like, wait a second, this is all about houses. How do we not have
Yeah.
separate licensing? And so it is
Yes.
pretty basic. We don't go
Mhm.
super granular into financial underwriting or analysis, but we give a big view picture of the industry and how all the different roles
Mhm.
are interconnected. And our goal is to give people a really strong foundation so they know the next steps to take in their education or in their career path. And
Mhm.
so we're kind of casting a wide net and just giving people a foundation and the connections they need to get established, because so many people come into this industry, don't have that, and then end up leaving within a year or two. And I think that's such a shame because it takes so much time and resources, and the industry really does need new and young talent. But the industry doesn't want to stop what they're doing to go train that talent, right? So this is trying to bridge that gap a little bit. Also, bridge the gap between universities and employers, because a
Mhm.
lot of times the universities and employer have a bit of a gap between what the employer needs and what the university is teaching them. So this is designed to bridge that gap quite a bit.
I love it. So, little commercial for CRE launch. I guess how can people get involved? Because I'm sure there's lots of people who want to pay it forward that also had a mentor like you had and want to make sure that the next generation succeeds and has the same or better opportunities than we did. How can people support you in this program? And what are all the avenues that are available to them?
Thanks for asking. Yes, there's lots of ways. We definitely need help. So they can get more information on CRE-launch.com. There are opportunities for mentorship. We have a few positions open for instructors, depending on what the need is. We have a specific curriculum that we try to fit. We have opportunities for people who can help grade assignments, because we don't like to do true or false. We like to give actual feedback on the assignments.
Nice.
We have opportunities for sponsorships and scholarships. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, but we definitely need the help of the whole industry to keep it going.
I love it. And thinking about the future, I know you're a person who, says plan and God laughs, and you don't have
Yes.
everything mapped out in front of you, which I kind of operate in a similar capacity as well. What are some of the things that you see on the horizon, whether it's for Foresight or CRE Launch or just you personally and the many things that you're doing in the industry? What are you looking forward to?
It's a balance every day trying to figure that out, because right now my kids are at an age where I feel like I'm having to tone back and scale back my ambition a little bit to make sure that I'm
Mhm.
prioritizing family. So right now I'm fitting a lot of my ambitions and goals within the parameters that I'm looking at to, so that I can prioritize the needs of my young kids still. And so
Yeah.
within those parameters, I'm picking out projects that I think can fit according
Mhm.
to the schedule that I want to keep, which is interesting. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but for the most part, I'm pretty strict on it to try to put in those guardrails. But as far as the future goes, for CRE launch, I'd love to see a campus in every major city. And I
Yeah.
would love to see it be 100% scholarship driven, because
Yes.
I don't want anyone to ever have to not be able to participate
Yes.
for financial needs. So we don't ever turn anyone away for financial need if they're going to a physical campus. So I want to be able to grow and expand that and get people behind it. I would love to see ways to be able to do similar programs internally at different brokerage
Mhm.
firms or other property management or accounting firms, and to be able to provide people with the knowledge of our industry, just because I think that there needs to be something to teach people
Yep.
about the
Yeah.
basics of our industry. Um, yeah, and as far as Foresight goes, we just opened up an Austin office, which I really enjoy. It's been a whole lot of fun. So I continue to see us growing in those markets, and maybe later in the future, other markets as well.
Awesome. I was going to mention Austin when you were saying, well, I try to do as much as I can. I'm like, sister, a new office is a big deal, especially in this economy and with all the challenges as well. Austin and San Antonio are not too far, but they're also not next door to each other. And I know you're doing a lot of creative things. One of the things that I think about you when I see you on all these different platforms is, how does Bethany do it all? And I know you've got some strategies and tips and tricks about how you're able to keep in the daily conversation on different social media platforms and specifically X. So tell us a little bit about how personal branding and social media have really helped your business and how you fit it into such a tremendously full professional and personal schedule.
Yeah, I'm learning. I don't have all the answers, but I will say I do a lot of stacking, I guess like you might call it, where if I'm going to do one thing and it benefits two things, I'm going to prioritize that one thing. So if I can do something that kills two birds at one stone, that goes to the very top of my list. An example of that is Austin. I needed more time away from my main office so that the main office could work within the systems that had already been created and grow, and they would be fine without me. And I needed some time away to be able to strategize on the growth of the company without
Mhm.
me being in the company every day. So I was like,
Yes.
all right, well, I need to be away anyways. I might as
Hmm.
well, while I'm there, build
Yeah.
relationships with the brokerage community and the owners in another market. And
Hmm.
Austin is about an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And
Hmm.
so that was the original idea, but it has taken off a little faster than I expected. And we have a team there now. So now I'm balancing again with finding time to pull away. But it's a matter of just finding ways to use those unused times. Or if I'm going to do
Hmm.
this and it can accomplish a couple of objectives, then that's what I'm going to do first. When it comes to social media, I use a lot of just dead time that
Hmm.
otherwise would be wasted with mindless scrolling or something like
Hmm.
that. So, waiting in the school pickup line while I'm waiting for the kids, I'll
Hmm.
share something, or waiting in the doctor's office if I'm taking my mom somewhere to an appointment. Just those weird times where you're just sitting there and you don't have anything else to do. I'll just share my
Hmm.
thoughts, and it might be something that I shared with the team or trained somebody on, or a conversation I had with someone wanting to get into the business, and I'll just write it out and then post it.
I love it. And I know one of the things too that I find that's unique to you, and not everybody works this way on social media, is that you're willing to share not just the bright and shiny stuff, but you're also willing to talk about the things that are hard in our business. And so, one example of that I know is a post that you made. I think you saw someone who had a unrealistic result in their first few interactions. Why don't you tell us that story and then talk about why it was important for you to put other things out there into the universe?
Yeah, that was the thing that kind of kicked me in the rear and said, okay, I can't be silent anymore. This is driving me nuts. I hate seeing people get discouraged. Like, I just can't handle it. I like to,
Mhm.
try to get people to stay in the business. And someone online, I was kind of lurking and I wasn't really posting, had posted a story about how they'd only been in the business a couple months. And then they posted a picture of their check. And everyone was like, wow, you're amazing. And you're the best at this. And he was kind of bragging. And I thought, that wasn't my story at all, but who cares? I guess the real point is, what if someone's reading that
Yeah.
and they quit tomorrow because they think
Mhm.
that they couldn't pull that off? And that bothered me. And I thought,
Mhm.
man, what I would need at that moment is to hear somebody that really didn't do great and still made it. And so I decided to share my story, which was after 3 years of working commission only, I got my first check, which was for 50 cents, which I still have saved over here. And I decided to post it and share everybody. I was like, here's the story of how I earned my first check of 50 cents. And I walked through all the deals I had died and all the challenges that had come through it and why it was 50 cents and how much money I owed the firm in training and legal fees. And I was like, hey, here it is. But I'm still in the business, right? Basically.
Mhm.
And I posted it. And that was one of the first things really that I had posted. I hadn't posted much more before that. And I woke up the next morning and it had gone crazy. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this really resonated. But what was really cool is I had multiple DMs from people being like, I was done and I'm going to
Oh,
go back to work tomorrow and I'm going to make a few more calls. And that touched me. And I was like, okay, yeah, there's a reason and there's some good to social media after all. And so I continued to post stories and I shared people like, okay, here's how it turned around and here's how it
mhm.
looked, but you just don't quit. Just don't quit.
Yeah.
And it was really fun and rewarding. And so that's what kicked off this whole social media adventure was that post.
I love it. And I think you had mentioned on a post recently why you are so committed to X as a platform. Can you talk about that and what it's done for your business?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I've only been on it maybe a couple of years or so.
Hmm.
I like it because you don't have to have it very polished. You can
Hmm.
give opinions pretty clearly, but maybe with some typos. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a little more informal. It feels a bit like networking during all the
Hmm.
dead time. For me, it works really well as a mom. I can't go to all these networking events and happy hours. I don't even enjoy those. I've never enjoyed those. But it's a bit just working out loud and letting people
Hmm.
see what's going on and peeking behind the hood and under the hood and figuring things out a little bit
Hmm.
and building relationships with people in a more organic way. So I really enjoy it, and it works out well that way. But I like to share stories and write little tidbits and encourage people along the way. And I think that's really what it is. I try to never to post anything negative. I'm sure I've made
Hmm.
mistakes, but I just like sharing some positivity about the industry because I feel like at any point in time, someone's about ready to quit, and I just want to try to make
Absolutely.
sure they don't.
Yeah, I think we're going through one of those times right now where people are wondering, why did I get in this business in the first place? And are dealing with, whether it's that thousandth rejection or hang up on a phone call or a deal falling apart right at the finish line. I know resilience is something that you have cultivated throughout your career. What do you think is behind that? Like, where are you pulling from when you are keeping yourself going through the inevitable ups and downs of commercial real estate?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of a deep one, trying to figure that out. I would be remiss to say that it didn't involve my faith.
Mhm.
I certainly think that's part of it. I think that whenever you go through the ups and downs, keeping a really long term perspective on things is what can help
Yeah.
pull you through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the long term perspective isn't weeks, months, or even
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
And when it gets really bad, it's not even in this lifetime. Right. And so I just
Hmm.
have to look really far out. and
Yeah.
and then every makes all of these little ups and downs not seem so severe anymore, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Absolutely, it does. So, you are someone who has gone from working in a corporate environment to being your own boss, owning and growing a company now with two locations. Is that something you ever saw on the horizon for you? How, I guess, looking back and reflecting, is there anything that you wish you would have known or would have done differently now in retrospect?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I think there was always that secret ambition and dreams of greater things and all of that. But then there was always this realistic side of me that was like, that's not for
Mhm.
me. That's probably not going to happen. Or I am who I am. And I don't have the connections and wherewithal to get these things to happen the way I dream about them. But I always had that in the back of my mind that wouldn't that be cool? And there was always the dream side of it being balanced by the realistic side. So I don't know. I think if I could tell myself anything when I was younger, it's just that everything that I sacrificed back then, in my 20s
Mhm.
particularly, was
Mhm.
worth it.
Yeah.
And that all of those decisions to minimize debt and to gain experience and focus on learning versus earning, all of that would pay off in dividends. And I hoped it would, but I had this cynicism and I guess a little bit of realism that maybe it wouldn't. So I'd love to tell myself that it would, but maybe that would have made me slow down a little. So it was better I didn't know.
Awesome. I'd love to know, kind of reflecting back on your career and thinking about not just Foresight, but the CRE Launch Program and the incredible relationships that you've built. What do you want our listeners today to take away from your personal story?
I want them to know that, it's just to look bigger and dream bigger on a longer perspective of things and to think about your impact in terms of generations, not just a day, a week, or a year, and certainly not in earnings. That all of that stuff kind of plays out and plays in, has its place as long as you're looking on the big long term picture. And so to think about kind of what you want to be known for integrity wise, and that'll carry through to your children and your relationships and your friendship circles, and it can change the world. And that's, I think it's important more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's what it's all about. Well, thank you, Bethany, so much for spending your time here with us on the Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast, and for all the work that you are doing to support the next generation, to keep people in commercial real estate. I salute you. I'm so proud of you and so happy to be your friend.
Well, thank you. Same to you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's special episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. It was such a pleasure talking with Bethany all about building Foresite, her career, and the various different journeys it has taken her on, the importance of mentorship and sponsorship in the business, and also the very new ways and very real ways of developing business and friendships using platforms like X. Bethany is such an incredible leader and inspires me and all of us, I think, to examine what our impact on this business will be. She's someone who I very much admire and appreciate, and again, want to just throw it out there. If you are feeling so called, there are still opportunities to sponsor scholarships for the CRE Launch Program or to volunteer as a mentor, as a potential speaker or lecturer in the program, as someone who is willing to sponsor a campus space in your office. The opportunities are vast, and I think it's a great way to give back, to pay it forward to the next generation, and to secure your legacy in the future of commercial real estate. So thank you so much, Bethany. Thank you so much for listening. We are thrilled to have you here with us on this episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast, and we look forward to seeing you soon.